The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council gleamed like a jewel made of impossibly twisted glass and light, its crystalline walls reflecting the assembled masses of 147 different species. Commander Aria Nightshade fought to keep her face neutral as she watched what had to be the galaxy's most elaborate circus show unfold before her eyes. Order. Order in the Assembly. High Counselor Zex Thrax's voice boomed across the chamber, his 4 arms raised in a gesture that probably looked majestic to everyone except Aria, who thought he looked like an overgrown purple octopus having a seizure. We shall now begin the vote regarding Resolution 47X91, the integration of Sol 3, designation Earth into the galactic community. Integration. Right. Because that's totally what this is, Aria thought, her diplomatic training the only thing keeping her from rolling her eyes. The voting began, and one by one, the holograms above each delegation lit up with their choices. Green for yes, red for no. Aria watched as a sea of green spread across the chamber, her heart sinking even as her mind raced with plans within plans. The Zrylaxians' vote yes announced a being that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a Christmas tree. Their primitive nuclear technology poses too great a risk to galactic stability. Oh honey, if you think nuclear tech is our biggest threat, you're in for a surprise. The Vextal Concordat votes yes chittered another delegate, this one resembling a giant neon blue cockroach. Their resources are too valuable to be left in the hands of such an underdeveloped species. Aria made a mental note to remember that particular delegate. Perhaps they'd enjoy a personal demonstration of human underdevelopment when this was all over. The voting continued, each species adding their self-righteous justification to the growing avalanche of condemnation. Humanity was too violent, too unpredictable, too resourceful, too stubborn, too quick to advance. It would have been funny if it wasn't so deadly serious. The K-Thri Empire votes yes rumbled a massive entity that seemed to be made entirely of living stone. Their entertainment media alone proves they require guidance. No species should be allowed to produce such addictive content without proper oversight. Wait until they discover cat videos, Aria thought, suppressing a smirk. As the last vote was cast, High Counselor Zex Thrax's voice rang out again. The vote is unanimous. Resolution 47X91 passes with full approval. Earth will be integrated into the galactic community under Category 7 protected status, with all resources and governance to be managed by the Council for the species' own protection and development. Protected status. Category 7. The diplomatic equivalent of being declared too stupid to tie your own shoes. Aria stepped forward, her boots clicking against the polished floor as she approached the central podium. High Counselor, she called out, her voice carrying across the now silent chamber. Earth requests the right to address the Assembly before the resolution is formally enacted. Zex Thrax's 8 eyes blinked in what might have been amusement. The Assembly recognizes Earth's representative, though we remind you that this vote is binding and final. Aria smiled, and several nearby delegates unconsciously leaned away from her. It was the kind of smile that made apex predators nervous. Oh, I understand completely, High Counselor. I simply wish to make sure I have the details correct for my report back to Earth. She pulled out a datapad, her voice taking on an almost cheerful tone. So to summarize, 147 species, representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, have just voted to essentially enslave humanity because we're simultaneously too primitive to manage ourselves and too dangerous to be left alone. That is a gross mischaracterization, Zex Thrax began. But Aria continued as if he hadn't spoken. And this decision was made based on our primitive technology, our wasteful use of our own resources, and our dangerous rate of advancement. She looked up from her datapad, that predatory smile still in place. Have I missed anything? Commander Nightshade, Zex Thrax's voice had taken on a warning tone. Your species' notorious tendency toward aggressive responses is precisely why this resolution was necessary. The Council's decision is made with the greatest concern for Earth's well-being. Of course it is. Aria's voice dripped with enough sarcasm to drown a small moon. And I'm sure the fact that Earth sits on one of the largest deposits of quantum-grade materials in the galaxy had absolutely nothing to do with this decision. A ripple of uncomfortable movement went through the Assembly. Aria noted with satisfaction which delegates looked particularly uncomfortable. You will receive the formal submission notice within 1 planetary rotation, Zex Thrax declared, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. The Council expects Earth's full cooperation in this transition. Aria bowed, a perfect diplomatic gesture that somehow managed to convey more disrespect than if she'd simply given them all the finger. Earth will respond appropriately to the Council's generosity. She straightened and turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and High Counselor, you might want to brush up on your Earth history, particularly the parts about what happened to the last bunch of would-be colonizers who thought they could simply vote away our rights. As she strode out of the assembly hall, Aria pulled out her actual communicator, not the decoy datapad she'd been using for show. Control, this is Nightshade. Operation Trojan Horse is a go. They took the bait. Every last one of them. The submission notice arrived exactly one rotation later, transmitted with all the pomp and ceremony the Galactic Council could muster. Earth's response was equally ceremonial, a simple acknowledgement of receipt, followed by what appeared to be complete acceptance of their new status. If any of the Council members found this suspiciously easy, they were too busy congratulating themselves to notice the Council's integration specialists arrived on Earth with all the subtlety of a peacock at a funeral. Their ships, gleaming with supposedly superior technology, hovered over major cities in what they clearly thought was an impressive display of power. Humanity responded with appropriately wide-eyed wonder and just the right amount of cowering. Behind closed doors, Commander Aria Nightshade watched the surveillance feeds and couldn't stop grinning. You know, Dr. Kane Thompson remarked from his workstation, where holographic quantum matrices danced in impossible patterns, I'm starting to feel almost bad for them. Almost his weathered face crinkled with amusement as he adjusted something in the quantum field projection. Like watching someone walk into a house of mirrors while wearing a blindfold. Save your sympathy for someone who didn't vote to enslave our entire species, Aria replied, though her tone was light. How's the quantum arsenal coming along? Kane's response was to gesture at the central display, where a simulation showed a Galactic Council warship attempting to engage its faster-than-light drive. The moment the ship's quantum field initialized, it collapsed in on itself like a paper crane in a hurricane. Beautiful, isn't it? He beamed like a proud parent. They thought they were so clever, building their entire infrastructure on quantum manipulation. Never occurred to them that someone might figure out how to turn their own quantum fields against them. And they'll never see it coming because they're so convinced we're still playing with basic particle physics. Kane finished with a savage grin. While they were busy voting on whether to pat us on the head and take our toys away, we were reverse engineering their quantum tech from salvaged probe parts and improving on it. Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert. A cloaked figure had appeared in one of the secure conference rooms, bypassing every security measure they had in place, or at least every security measure they had allowed the Council to know about. Right on schedule, Aria murmured, heading for the conference room. Keep working on those surprises, Doctor. I have a feeling our friend brings interesting news. The cloaked figure turned out to be Ambassador Vyra Lith, her crystalline features catching the light in ways that made human eyes want to look elsewhere. Of all the Council species, the Lumini were perhaps the most aesthetically alien to human sensibilities. Commander Nightshade, Vyra Lith's voice chimed like wind through glass. The Council grows suspicious of Earth's compliance. Some members argue that such ready acceptance of protected status indicates either unprecedented wisdom or concealed duplicity. Aria leaned back in her chair, the picture of unconcern. Let me guess, Zex Thrax is pushing for immediate resource extraction rather than the planned gradual integration. Indeed. The Council has voted to accelerate the timeline. They intend to begin installing their control systems within the next solar cycle. Vyra Lith's crystalline form shifted in what might have been discomfort. I felt you should be warned, though I suspect you anticipated this. Ambassador Aria's smile was genuine this time. Has it occurred to you to wonder why we specifically requested that the Council provide and install their own control systems? The luminized surface rippled with colors that suggested dawning comprehension. You wanted their own technology deployed throughout your infrastructure. Seems only fair, don't you think? They're so concerned about our primitive technology being a danger to the galaxy. We thought we'd make it easier for them by letting them install their own superior systems. Systems which you have already learned to compromise. Vyra Lith's tone held something like admiration. I couldn't possibly comment on that. Aria stood and walked to the window, watching as Council engineers bustled about, installing quantum control nodes at key points throughout the city. Each node was meant to allow the Council complete control over Earth's infrastructure. Though I will say that Dr. Thompson has some fascinating theories about quantum field manipulation. The Council believes they are casting a net vira lith observed, but you are allowing them to forge their own chains. Poetic and accurate Aria turned back to face her alien ally. Why are you helping us, Ambassador? You voted with the Council. Because the Lumini remember Vera Lith's surface went dark, showing only pinpoints of light like distant stars. We remember when we were deemed too primitive to govern ourselves. We remember the taste of chains, even though ours were broken long ago. Her form brightened again. And perhaps we see in humanity what we once were, what we could have been, had we fought back as you planned to do. Across the city, more quantum control nodes hummed to life. In secure facilities deep underground, Dr. Thompson's teams were already beginning to subvert and redirect their signals. Each node the Council installed thinking it would help them control Earth was instead being transformed into a weapon that could be turned against them. The Council's arrogance blinds them, Vera Lith continued. They see your entertainment broadcasts, your political squabbles, your seemingly primitive spacecraft, and they believe they understand humanity. They do not realize they are watching a performance. Speaking of performances, Aria checked her watch. I believe it's time for my daily meeting with the integration team. Time to go act appropriately grateful for their generous guidance. She paused at the door. Ambassador, when this all goes down, remember which side you chose to stand on. After Vira Lith had departed, Aria received another update from Dr. Thompson. The quantum weapon prototypes were ready for mass production, disguised as components of the Council's control systems. Every piece of technology the Council was so generously installing on Earth was being subtly modified, transformed from instruments of control into instruments of rebellion. The best part, Dr. Thompson's message concluded, is that their own quantum detection systems won't notice anything wrong because we're using their own technology against them. It's like we've taught their locks to lie about being locked. Poetry and quantum mechanics, if I do say so myself. Aria smiled as she watched another Council ship arrive, carrying more control systems for installation. They were so eager to get their chains in place that they were doing most of the work for humanity's revenge themselves. Sometimes, she reflected, the best trap was the one your target insisted on walking into while congratulating themselves on their own cleverness. The occupation fleet emerged from quantum space in perfect formation, their ships arranged in the Council's standard display of overwhelming force. 5,000 vessels, representing the combined military might of 147 species, prepared to take their positions around Earth. Their quantum drives hummed with power, their weapons primed, their troops ready to begin the peaceful transition of power. In his flagship's command center, Fleet Admiral Crow Thak of the Zrylaxian Empire watched with satisfaction as his forces moved into position. Send the compliance notification, he ordered, his mandibles clicking with barely contained glee. Inform the humans that any resistance will be met with. His words cut off as every quantum drive in the fleet simultaneously ceased functioning. On Earth, Commander Aria Nightshade sat in the newly established Human Integration Command Center, surrounded by Council observers who had come to oversee the occupation. She watched their confused expressions with the kind of joy usually reserved for opening presents on Christmas morning. Is something wrong? She asked innocently, noting how the Council members were frantically checking their quantum communicators. You all look a bit concerned. Our systems are experiencing some kind of quantum field disruption, one of the observers, a Vextal administrator, chittered nervously. But that's impossible. Human technology isn't advanced enough to. Oh, about that, Aria interrupted, standing up with a predatory grace that made several observers take involuntary steps backward. Dr. Thompson, would you like to explain to our friends what's happening to their fleet? Or should I? The quantum physicist's voice came through the room's speakers, sounding altogether too cheerful for someone supposedly witnessing the occupation of his planet. Remember all those lovely control systems you had us install? Turns out they work remarkably well, just not quite the way you intended. In orbit, Admiral Crow Thak watched in horror as his fleet's quantum fields began to collapse one by one. Ships that had been preparing to launch invasion forces found themselves unable to open their bay doors. Weapons systems reported critical failures. Communication arrays went dark. What do you mean? The quantum fields are being reversed, he screamed at his chief engineer. That's not possible. Their technology is primitive. They barely understand basic quantum mechanics. Back on Earth, Aria walked to the central display terminal, her finger hovering over a particular button that hadn't been there the day before. Would anyone like to guess what this does? No? Allow me to demonstrate. She pressed the button. Across the planet, every quantum control node the Council had installed began to pulse with energy. But instead of exerting control over Earth's infrastructure as intended, they created a planet-wide quantum disruption field that turned the aliens' own technology against them. Fun fact about humans, Aria announced to the increasingly panicked observers. We have this wonderful literary tradition called science fiction for centuries. We've been imagining all the ways a technologically superior force might try to conquer us. So when you showed up with your quantum tech and your patronizing attitudes, well, let's just say we had a few ideas ready. In orbit, Admiral Crow-Thak's flagship was spinning helplessly, its quantum core having transformed from a power source into what was effectively a very expensive paperweight. The rest of the fleet was in similar disarray, their mighty warships reduced to floating metal boxes. What you're experiencing, Doctor, Thompson's voice explained cheerfully, is what we call a quantum field inversion. Simply put, we've turned your own quantum manipulation technology inside out. Your ships can't use quantum drives because their quantum fields are now operating in reverse. Your weapons can't fire because their quantum targeting systems are telling them they don't exist. And your communications are down because, well, same principle. One of the Council observers, a massive K-Thry, lunged for Aria, or tried to. The quantum field affecting their technology had an interesting side effect on their powered armor. It locked up completely, leaving the warrior frozen mid-stride. Oh yes, Aria noted with evident satisfaction. We also figured out how to use your quantum tech to disable those fancy combat suits. Might want to be careful about movement for a while. Wouldn't want you to tip over and hurt yourself. On every Council ship, in every invasion force, and throughout the observer teams on Earth, the same realization was dawning. They had walked straight into a trap. Worse, they had built most of the trap themselves. Now then, Aria's voice carried across all emergency frequencies, the only ones still working, because Earth had graciously left them operational. Let's discuss the terms of your surrender. And before anyone gets any clever ideas about calling for reinforcements, she nodded to Dr. Thompson. The physicist activated another set of controls. Across the solar system, quantum beacons flared to life, extending Earth's quantum disruption field to cover every possible approach vector. The entire Sol system had just become a no-go zone for quantum technology, except for the versions humans had modified to work under the new conditions. As you can see, Aria continued, we've taken the liberty of ensuring our discussion won't be interrupted. Don't worry about your life support systems, we're allowing those to function. We're not monsters. After all, we just believe that any species that votes unanimously to enslave another should be prepared to face the consequences. In the Integration Command Center, the Council observers watched in stunned silence as their mighty occupation fleet drifted helplessly in orbit, effectively neutered by the very technology they had smugly assumed humans were too primitive to understand. Oh, and Admiral Crow-Thak, Aria added, knowing the Zrylaxian commander could still receive transmissions, even if he couldn't respond. Remember last week when you said humans would thank the Council for its guidance once we understood our place in the galaxy? I believe we do understand our place now. It's just not quite the place you had in mind. Dr. Thompson's laughter echoed through the command center. Should we show them what else we've learned to do with quantum fields? I've got this lovely demonstration prepared involving their flagship's artificial gravity. Now, Dr. Aria chided, though her grin suggested she was tempted. Let's not be petty. We'll save the rest of our surprises for anyone who might need additional convincing. She turned back to the observers, who were still trying to process how completely their invasion had been turned on its head. Now then, who would like to contact the Council and explain how humanity has, what was the phrase? Ah, yes, responded appropriately to their generosity. The Galactic Council's emergency session was already in chaos when Commander Aria Nightshade strode into the chamber. This time, she didn't bother with the diplomatic entrance, she simply appeared in the center of the room. Courtesy of Earth's newly revealed quantum teleportation technology. I believe she announced to the panicking delegates, this is the part where we renegotiate the terms of our integration into the galactic community. High Counselor Zex Thrax's multiple limbs were practically tied in knots as he tried to maintain order. This is unprecedented. The quantum technology you're using, it's impossible. You can't have developed this independently. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. Aria's voice carried easily over the din. We didn't develop it independently. We learned it from you. Every probe you sent, every probe piece of tech you so generously installed on our planet, they were all teaching tools. Really expensive teaching tools, I might add. On the massive displays surrounding the chamber, footage began playing of Earth's counter-offensive. Human ships sleeker and more advanced than anything the Council had expected emerged from quantum shadows near key Council installations. But instead of attacking, they simply waited. As you can see, Dr. Thompson's voice echoed through the chamber as he materialized beside Aria. We've taken the liberty of positioning quantum disruptor fields around several of your most important military installations. Currently, they're inactive. Whether they stay that way is entirely up to you. The Council erupted again, but this time it was Ambassador Vyra Lith who stepped forward, her crystalline form glowing with purpose. Perhaps now would be an appropriate time to discuss certain irregularities in the Council's recent decisions. Zex Thrax's color shifted to a sickly purple. Ambassador, this is hardly the time. On the contrary, Vyra Lith's voice chimed like breaking glass. This is exactly the time, she gestured, and new displays activated, showing financial transactions, secret communications, and backdoor deals. The vote to enslave Earth wasn't about protection or stability. It was about resources specifically, who would profit from them. Dr. Thompson couldn't help but add, we particularly enjoyed the part where you calculated the profit margins on human labor resources. Very thorough accounting. Completely evil, of course, but thorough. The evidence was damning. Nearly half the Council members had taken bribes or made deals to exploit Earth's resources, with Zex Thrax at the center of it all. The other half had simply been manipulated with false data about human aggression and technological development. The Lumini delegation, Vyra Lith announced, moves to immediately rescind Resolution 47x91 and recognize Earth's full sovereign status. Second came a gravelly voice from the K-Thri delegation. Their representative, still nursing wounded pride from the failure of their combat armor, had apparently decided that honesty was the better part of valor. Before Zex Thrax could object, Aria raised her hand. Every quantum device in the chamber, from personal communicators to the central computer systems, emitted a soft pulse that locked them in place. Let me be clear, she said into the sudden silence. Earth is not interested in revenge. We're not even particularly interested in punishment, though there will be consequences for those who plan to enslave our species. Her smile was razor sharp. What we are interested in is ensuring this never happens again to us or to any other developing civilization. Dr. Thompson activated another display, showing the quantum disruptor fields spreading to cover more and more Council space. We can shut down every quantum-based system in Council space with the push of a button. But we'd rather not. Contrary to what your reports claimed, humans aren't actually aggressive by nature. We're defensive. Aggressively defensive, Aria amended with a smirk. The point is, we're offering a choice. You can either accept new terms that recognize Earth as a full and equal member of the galactic community, with guaranteed protections for other developing civilizations, or we can demonstrate just how many ways we've learned to weaponize your own technology against you. The chamber had grown very quiet. In the displays, more Council worlds were going dark as human ships moved into position. No shots fired, no weapons deployed, just the simple threat of technological paralysis. Did you know, Dr. Thompson remarked conversationally, that we've figured out how to selectively disable quantum tech? We can shut down military systems while leaving civilian infrastructure intact. Quite useful, really. Lets us be precise about who faces consequences for their actions. One by one, Council members began signaling their acceptance of Earth's terms. Some did it grudgingly, some eagerly, and some, like Vyra Lith's Lumini, with what appeared to be genuine relief. Oh, and High Counselor Aria turned to Zex Thrax, who was trying very hard to blend into his seat. Remember when you said humans would need proper oversight to handle advanced technology? I believe we've demonstrated adequate competence, but just to be thorough. She nodded to Dr. Thompson, who activated one final display. It showed the complete breakdown of how Earth had reverse-engineered and improved upon Council technology, complete with annotations pointing out vulnerabilities the Council hadn't even known existed. We're sharing this with everyone, Aria explained. Complete technological transparency. Because unlike some species we could name, we believe in actual galactic cooperation. The implications weren't lost on anyone. Earth wasn't just demonstrating military superiority, they were showing that they understood Council technology better than the Council did. The vote is recorded, Vyra Lith announced, her crystalline form blazing with satisfaction. Earth is recognized as a sovereign power, with full rights and privileges under galactic law. Excellent. Aria's smile had lost its predatory edge. Now, about those corruption charges. The next few hours were busy as council members scrambled to realign themselves with the new power reality. Those implicated in the corruption scandal found themselves facing serious charges, while those who had merely been misled were quick to establish new, more equitable relationships with Earth. Dr. Thompson continued his demonstration of human technological capabilities, each revelation making it clearer how completely the Council had underestimated humanity. And this, he said, pulling up a particularly complex quantum matrix, is how we turned your control nodes into our defense grid. Elegant, isn't it? Almost like they were designed to be repurposed. As the day drew to a close, Aria found herself standing with Vyra Lith, watching as the council chamber slowly emptied of shell-shocked delegates. You planned this from the beginning, the Lumini observed. The moment they voted to enslave Earth, you were already preparing this response. Actually, Aria admitted, we started preparing the moment your first probe entered our solar system. Humanity has a long history of dealing with colonizers who thought they knew what was best for us. We've gotten quite good at it. And now, Vyra Lith asked, what will humanity do with its new position in the galaxy? Aria's answer was interrupted by Dr. Thompson, who appeared with a new set of quantum readings. You're going to love this, he said, grinning like a kid with a new toy. Remember those quantum field inversions we used on their fleet? Well, I think I've figured out how to use them for faster than light travel without any of the current limitations. How do you feel about revolutionizing galactic transportation? One thing at a time, Dr. Aria laughed. Let's finish dealing with the current revolution before we start the next one. One standard galactic month after what was now being called the integration incident, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The hierarchical seating that had once placed primitive species at the bottom had been replaced with a circular arrangement that put all members on equal footing. Well, almost all members. Former High Counselor Zex Thrax stood in the center of the chamber, his once pristine ceremonial robes replaced with the simple gray garments of one awaiting judgment. His multiple limbs were still, his 8 eyes fixed on the floor. Let the record show. Commander Aria Nightshade announced from her position at the newly established Earth seat that the former High Counselor has admitted to orchestrating the attempted enslavement of humanity for personal profit, manipulating council votes through fraudulent intelligence, and attempting to establish a resource monopoly through forced labor. The evidence is quite thorough, Dr. Thompson added, almost cheerfully, especially after we quantum decoded his private communications. Who knew quantum encryption could be reversed? Oh wait, we did. The chamber, once a place of pompous ceremony, now hummed with an entirely different energy. Representatives from dozens of worlds were practically climbing over each other to establish trade agreements with Earth. The same species that had voted for humanity's enslavement were now offering technology exchanges, resource partnerships, and military alliances. The Zrylaxian Empire would like to formally request access to Earth's improved quantum drive technology, announced the same mantis-like being who had once declared humans too primitive to handle nuclear power. We are prepared to offer significant concessions. All technological advances will be shared equally among council members, Aria interrupted, as per the new Charter of Galactic Cooperation. No special deals, no secret advantages. That's rather the point of all this. Ambassador Vyra Lith, now serving as the head of the newly formed Ethics Committee, chimed in. Perhaps we should address the former High Counselor's sentencing before moving on to trade negotiations. Zex Thrax's color shifted to that sickly purple again. I demand justice under the old council laws. Oh, you really don't, Dr. Thompson interrupted. Under the old laws, attempting to enslave a sentient species was punishable by quantum dissolution. We've developed something much more fitting. Aria stood, and the chamber fell silent. In recognition of humanity's apparently primitive status, we've decided to handle this in an appropriately primitive way, she smiled. Former High Counselor Zexthrax, you are sentenced to spend the next 5 Earth years studying human history. Specifically, the history of how we've dealt with would-be conquerors, colonial powers, and anyone else who thought they could take our freedom. And Dr. Thompson added with evident glee, you'll be required to write essays about what you've learned, which will be published across all council communication channels. The chamber erupted in a mixture of laughter and shocked gasps. Some species found the sentence hilariously fitting, while others were scandalized by its unorthodox nature. Zexthrax himself looked like he might have preferred quantum dissolution. Moving on to new business, Aria continued. Earth's proposal for the protection of developing civilizations has been distributed to all members. We expect a vote by the end of this session. The proposal was revolutionary. Any species discovered to be developing spacefaring capability would be protected. Not integrated, they would be allowed to advance at their own pace, make their own mistakes, and join the galactic community on their own terms. But how will we prevent them from becoming a threat? Someone called out from the chamber. The same way you failed to prevent us from becoming one, Dr. Thompson replied. By respecting their sovereignty and not giving them a reason to see you as enemies. The vote, when it came, was unanimous, though this time out of genuine agreement rather than corruption and coercion. One by one, council species were discovering that cooperation with humanity offered far more benefits than attempting to control them ever could. There is one final matter, Viralith announced. The election of a new High Counselor. All eyes turned to Aria, who raised her hands in a gesture of refusal. Earth has no interest in ruling the council. We believe in collective governance, not central authority. Instead, we propose rotating leadership, with terms limited to ensure no single species can accumulate too much power. How very primitive of you, one delegate muttered, though the tone was more admiring than condescending. Indeed, Aria agreed. We primitive humans have this quaint belief that power should serve the people, not the other way around. We also believe in something called karma, though in this case, poetic justice might be more accurate. As the session concluded, Dr. Thompson approached Aria with yet another quantum breakthrough displayed on his pad. You know, he mused, it's almost disappointing how quickly they surrendered. I had at least 30 more quantum weapon designs ready to go. Save them, Aria advised. Humanity's reputation for turning other species' technology against them might come in handy someday. Besides, she added with a grin, watching them try to figure out how we managed all this is far more entertaining than actually using it. The final irony wasn't lost on anyone. The species that had been deemed too primitive to govern themselves had ended up teaching the so-called advanced civilizations of the galaxy lessons about governance, ethics, and the proper use of power. As Aria watched the former High Counselor being led away to begin his sentence of historical education, she couldn't help but quote one of humanity's favorite phrases, "Be careful what you wish for, you just might get it." The galaxy would never be the same. And that, as humans like to say, was exactly the point.